what meditation is doing is essentially keeping the body from going into this fight-flight response habitually under, any given circumstance. Stress, what we call stress, is keeping our body in a constant fight-flight response. That is ruinous to the circulatory system, to the hormones, it just
inflammation.
Inflammation, everything. It is ruinous. Your sleep's going to suffer. You name it.
I'd like to welcome the show, Richard Haight. How you doing, Richard?
Great, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being on the show, and thank you for the work that you do in your books and your programs and everything you do. And I really wanted to dive in deep on your perspective on meditation and consciousness and spiritual awakening and your path in life. So can you start off with your origin story? How did you get involved in this in the spiritual path?
Yeah, it actually goes back to when I was about 8 years old. I was in our neighborhood. We had a woman who had a Wednesday night Bible study practice, a Bible study class, and her son happened to be the eldest kid in the neighborhood, and he convinced us all of us to go, saying that if we didn't, we'd go to hell. So of course, quite naturally, we agreed to go, and that's where it began. I did not know what Christianity really was at that time, of course, and I didn't know the intentions of this woman. But after some months, she had indoctrinated us to be, we'll say, shepherds of the Lord, and that we were to convert our parents to her particular type of Christian. Some of the parents were Christian, and some of them I don't know. But it didn't matter that you were Christian. You had to be this specific type of Christianity in order to be saved. Otherwise, you would go to hell.
Obviously,
which is rather extreme. Obviously, rather extreme point of view. So I actually, they put fear into me, and I really believed that maybe they would go to hell, and it was on my shoulders, an 8-year-old shoulders, to save my parents. So I went home that night convinced, and asked if we could have a conversation on religion, and my parents, quite shocked by the statement, by the request, actually agreed. But they had a caveat that we had to speak as adults, right? And if I was willing to speak to them as an adult, that they would be happy to have that conversation. So I did. He got out. My father was the one who primarily had the conversation. He got out his Bibles, asked me to get mine, and open it up, and sort of give me a guided tour of the inconsistencies and the areas that deserve some skepticism, or really an honest, hard look. And I was really shocked to find out that there were inconsistencies in what was considered to be an infallible document, or what I was told was an infallible document. He directed me primarily to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John's, the very end of their text, where they're talking about Jesus having been crucified is put into the tomb, and then what happens therein. And each account is stated to be factually true, but they all give 4 very distinct accounts that are irreconcilable. Some of them are, they never went into the tomb. Some of them, they went into the tomb, there was a guy in white robes, and some of them, they went into a tomb and there was an angel there with lightning bolts. And, it's just inconsistent. And I was really put back on my heels. But what he did say that was, I think, very helpful is, if you're interested in this, just do it honestly, do it sincerely. If you really want to know God, don't assume that you can just learn this from somebody else. You have to find it yourself. Don't be lazy about it, essentially. That was kind of where it started, because a few weeks later, maybe a month later, I don't know, I started having this reoccurring dream. And it was, I would wake up in the middle of the night, the room was aglow in this sort of warm, for lack of a better term, I would say love, but it actually lit up the room. And I could see on the middle of the floor was this person lying on the floor, a man. And I felt compelled or drawn to go to that person, which of course makes little sense. If you had a man lying on the floor in your room as an 8-year-old child, you're probably going to be terrified. But no, nothing like that. And I went to him, and as soon as I looked into his eyes, I just had this feeling that this is Jesus Christ, which is a very strange. At the time in the dream, you don't think it's strange. You're in a dream state, altered reality or whatever. So I didn't have the thought that it was strange. That was sort of a retrospective. But there was this deep love and compassion, and also a sorrow. And he said to me, "Help, please help me." And so I tried to help him by grabbing his wrist and picking him up. I thought he wanted help up, but his arm squished in my hand like a water balloon. And I looked at his body, and I could see that he had no bones. It was sagging. And then he looked at me again, and he said, "Please help me." And at that moment, I get kicked out of the dream. The same dream repeated again and again, maybe every couple of weeks or something like that. It just sort of ran at unexpected times. When I'd enter the dream, I would never remember that I'd had it before. But upon waking from it, I would remember it was exactly the same moment by moment to every other occurrence, and that I'd had it multiple times. And I would always get kicked out at exactly the moment when he asked me the second time to help him, the moment when I wanted to ask him how. And I could never ask him how and get that answer. Over a period of time, I realized that maybe if I set an intention, almost like a prayer before I go to bed, to stay in that dream just a little bit longer, because this was a dream that was haunting me throughout my day. It was like I go to school, I couldn't think about anything but this, really. And that's basically how it started, because one night, finally, I could stay in that dream a little bit longer. My body surged with energy, and I could ask him how. And he says, "Find my bones, for they're the essence of my teaching, and bring them back to the world." And that's where it started. But I understood that I wouldn't get it from reading the Bible, because it's already been too distorted, right? Mm-hmm. It's already been turned into a religion, turned into a marketing game, turned into all of the things that happen, historically through religions just about anywhere, right? It gets distorted. And whatever that fundamental message was had been lost. And so I'm not going to find it reading it there. Although he did hint that there were some parts of what he said that are reflected accurately in the Bible. I don't know if that was actually Jesus. I have no way of knowing. I have no way of knowing if it wasn't. It's just it could have just been a dream. But that's where my journey started, and I understood, like in my bones, that whatever it was that was going to be discovered, I had to find it through my own life experience. And only after that would I be able to look back on the Bible and go, yeah, these are the bones of Christ. This is the foundation of his teachings. Yeah. And that's where it started.
Yeah, I mean, Jesus' teachings have been distorted a bit, to say the least, in history. I think it was Yogananda, Paramahansa Yogananda, who said that Christ's teachings, he might have been crucified once, but his teachings get crucified for the next 1,000 or 2,000 years. It's pretty great. It's a great quote.
Yes,
it's very true.
Yes,
and
it's pretty accurate. And that explains the sorrow in his eyes that I saw in the dream. I don't know if Jesus ever actually walked the earth, or if this is just some sort of archetypical character that's, I don't know. None of that really concerned me. I wasn't concerned with finding Jesus's truth. Actually, as I matured, when I was young, I wanted to find Jesus's teachings and bring them to the world. But as I matured, I realized any teaching that's worth anything is true, period. It's not his teaching. It's just a reflection of a fundamental truth. And I don't need to try and make whatever I find conform to anybody's teaching. It just has to be true for anybody who actually applies it. And that was a shift that occurred as I matured. And ultimately, I went to Japan to study martial arts and looking for more, I would say, an embodied awareness. Because I thought if it was true, it can't just be intellect. It can't just be abstraction. It can't just be your imagination. It can't just be ideology, and it can't just be philosophy. And it can't just be psychology. It has to go deeper than all of those things.
How you got started on the path so young is pretty remarkable, because normally as 8-year-olds, when I was told about hell, because I went to Catholic school and I still feel guilty about it. When I was told about hell, I came home, I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified. It did exactly what it was designed to do. And as years went on, and there's so many different things, I was just like, this doesn't make any sense to me. You mean to tell me that if I eat pork on Friday, I'm going to hell? Like, this doesn't make sense to me. And then this other dude's going to murder somebody and he's going to go to hell. There's just something not right here. Even as a young man growing up, I started figuring this out. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. So I can go do some atrocity, then go get confession and get cleansed. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me either. Karma makes sense. Karma makes a lot more sense to me. And then when I started going into the Eastern philosophies and thoughts, and I was like, okay. But it's like I don't know who said this, but it's like that old joke, not old joke, but old story that the blind man that tells the seven people or something like that to go out and tell me what the elephant looks like. And they each come back with a different part of the elephant. Like, no, the elephant is a trunk. And I think that's pretty much what religion is and philosophies and thoughts. It's everyone's got little pieces of it, and there's truth kernels in all of it, but no one's got it all figured out just yet. Is that fair to say?
That's right. That's fair to say. I don't believe it's even helpful. Oh, so you use the term religion, but so if we step away from religion, because religion is, it's sort of like it's where we where we make God in our image. That's religion. That's been my experience so far. And we can step away from the word God because that's a highly loaded term. And I've never met any two people who have the same, like if you dig down a little bit when someone asks you, do you believe in God? And you dig down, what do you mean by God? No one has the same two understandings. Although there's a common theme among Christians, is sort of this guy with a long beard, old man with a long beard on a cloud, which sort of looks like Zeus or maybe Moses, right?
Right.
And it's an unconscious thing. They hadn't even considered it, but that's their view, unconscious association with God. And I would suggest that that's probably far from the reality. And it's not, and that in a sense is a mental idol. That's idol worship according to, it's not a physical idol, but it is a mental idol, and it's not going to actually fit the reality, whatever that is. From my perspective, whatever the fundament of reality is, it can be experienced. I've experienced it multiple times, but I will never understand it. Because to understand something, you have to be able to measure it, and to be able to get an accurate measurement of something, you have to be able to get something else to compare it to measure it by. And if it is the foundation of being, and there is no other than it, then there's no way to get out of it in order to measure it, which means the mind can never encapsulate it. And our measurements will only be biased measurements based off of our ideology, our assumptions. And it will always distort, and it will always lead to inner disharmony. And so it is best to keep it as the great mystery, in a sense, understanding that it can be experienced, but it will not be understood.
And that's the thing, when you start studying great spiritual teachers, yogis, people who have found enlightenment in one way, shape, or form, they even don't. There's no explanation to it. They try to explain it, but words can't really do it justice. It's a feeling. It's a thing that it's so hard to explain. How can you explain enlightenment? Like that's such a, I mean, you could write volumes and volumes and volumes and never get the answer that you would get in a feeling. It's so difficult. And all the great masters have done that. It's very difficult. They try with little nuggets and little things, but no one's ever been able to just go, okay, here is enlightenment. Here is your spiritual path. Here is consciousness. It's difficult, to say the least.
There are some things that could be passed on that are helpful, but they will never be perfectly accurate. Like just changing enlightenment to EN-LIGHT-ment, like lighten up. That's really what happens when you start to experience this thing. Is you start to actually lighten up a bit. You stop being so darn certain about everything, right? And it's actually a beautiful thing. It keeps you more present and more aware. And another aspect of the enlightenment experience, especially we say, an awakening experience, especially as it starts to kind of flow into your life more and more, and the volume of it turns up, is there's a kind of clarity that's more than mental clarity. It's not just emotional clarity, it's a bodily clarity. And I don't mean like your body is physically healthier. I mean that you're feeling, which is something that's throughout the body, the capacity to feel, that in itself becomes clearer. You become aware of the content of the subconscious much more. You can ask questions like, why did I have that dream? And you know the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Why am I thinking that or feeling this particular thing? Sometimes we have strange compulsions and motivations that we don't know, and you understand the answer, right? There's that kind of a clarity that's very functional and very helpful, and which you can use then in a productive way to improve all aspects of your life to the best degree that they could be improved in any case.
Yeah, when I was growing up, I always was very curious about this path. I didn't jump in as early as you did, but I've noticed that just living, there is so much noise, so much fog, so much emotion, so many things that are all around you that cloud any sort of light from coming in almost. It's like this dark cloud that's always around you, and there's noise and there's things, and it's pretty insane. But when you start to go inward, which is where the answers lie, in my opinion, when you start going inward through meditation, through prayer, whatever the word you want to use, you start clearing that stuff out. And the word clarity, I wanted to kind of hook onto that word you were saying. That's exactly what happened to me when I started meditating 5 years ago. I do a lot of very heavy meditations every day, and my life started to clear. Things that were questions that I had always asked, never could get an answer to, the answer started to flow in. Light started to come in. Things started to see clear. I started to see people clear, situations clear. When something happens to you, you don't say, oh, why did it happen to me? You go, what is this trying to teach me? What is the universe, or whatever word you want to use, trying to push me in what direction? Because I don't believe in accidents and things like that. I think everything happens for a reason. Something as simple as, me breaking my foot. At first I was angry, as you would be, and you go, what? But then you sit down for a second and you go, why did this happen at this moment in time? What is this trying to tell? What is the universe trying to tell me that I was so stubborn and couldn't hear the first 5 times that they just whispered it? And apparently the universe said, oh, okay, he doesn't get it. Let's do this too. And that could be a car accident. That could be a relationship. That could be so many different things. I always feel that that's what's happening. But again, that word clarity is what I think what happens with meditation. Do you agree?
Yes, it's a natural effect of any authentic meditation practice. Now, if the person is trying to go into a meditative practice through escapism, like their goal is to escape, I don't know if it's necessarily going to have any effect. That's just a useless mindset. It's not helpful. And so if a person is trying to escape their inner disharmonies or the difficulties of their life, the first step is to change that mindset, right? To realize that meditation, if it's going to be effective, is not about escapism, but instead it's a centering and allowing a fuller vision, a fuller sight, a greater contextual awareness through the body, not intellect. And that's where the clarity comes from. One of the things that I really appreciate about what you said is you're referring to attitude. It's this attitude that you can learn from anything. That each moment is an opportunity to learn. Whether it's pleasant or unpleasant is irrelevant. Actually, oftentimes the more unpleasant ones are the things you're going to learn most from. Mm-hmm. The only area where I would suggest that I might not embrace is that I would project that the universe is doing something to me, because it creates a perspective of self and other, as if there's the universe and you are separate from it and it's doing something to you. Whereas I see it as there's just a continuum that I don't fully understand, but it is one thing, whatever it is. And I don't know if it has an intent to do anything to me or the reverse. It's just a continual relationship that is a learning from all individual perspectives in that unified continuum or field. So even the insect, even the tree, even the wind, all of it is experiencing. All of it is, I don't know if learning is the right term, but all of it is experiencing and flowing. Human beings have the capacity to reflect and learn, so we can take it extra advantage. Maybe others do too. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just had I just had a few guests on the show talking about. They did a whole documentary on consciousness, and in there they were talking to neuroscientists. I forgot the term when you study plants, herbologists, I guess. Botanists. Thank you. Botanists. But what was so amazing is like they were figuring out if consciousness lived in plants, if it was just a thing. And the amazing thing is, which will lead me to my next question, is that they actually were able to trick the plant into the roots to go where the water was and wasn't, based off of sound. So you would see the plant look for water based on sound or based on, so like when you start seeing things like that, you're like, wait, but that's not, they're just inanimate objects who just kind of grow. They're not. There is a sense of consciousness. And then trees, there's a whole documentary on trees and mushrooms and all these kinds. The consciousness of these kinds
we assume because they don't look like us and they don't have a nervous system that's like us, that they don't have that they don't have consciousness.
Right.
That is an assumption. It is an unscientific point of view. Mm-hmm. And it just requires that we be a little bit less humble. Back in the days of Galileo, when he's saying, we're not the center of the universe. We rotate around the sun. But still, today, many of us believe that human beings are the centers of consciousness. And I would suggest that that's not true. Mm-hmm. That at least it would be helpful for us to dispel that assumption and consider that everything may be conscious. That consciousness is not only an aspect of the universe, that it is the foundation of the universe. We should at least consider that perspective.
Mm-hmm. What is what is your definition?
It's important that we separate out in consciousness from intelligence.
Right.
And that's where people get confused. So I define intelligence just as it's defined in the dictionary as essentially the ability to manipulate information. Mm-hmm. That's all that intelligence is. Consciousness is the capacity to perceive. And I do not necessarily mean a specific sensory perception. It is the awareness of being. And that's it. And everything else are just senses stacked on top of that awareness of being. So the reason I would suggest that is as you go down into a meditative state, deeper and deeper, sense of self falls away. Your senses might turn off. All perception of specific things can turn off. All that's left is a vibrant awareness of being that is completely transcendent to your sense of personal identity. Mm-hmm. You can't say, I am Richard at that state. I am Alex at that stage. It's just being. And complete vibrant silence. And basically everything else in the brain is shut off.
Yeah,
not intelligence.
When you do it right, and it takes you a minute to get to that place in meditation, at least from my experience. I tried meditating multiple times over the course of my life. And I could never get past, it's too noisy or this and that. And you're trying to silence the mind and all that stuff. And I just came to the realization, like, you can't silence the mind if you try. In my opinion, this is just my personal opinion. I'd love to hear yours as far as meditation is concerned. But when I meditate, there's the mind's going to go, the thoughts are going to go. But as you just let them keep flowing in and out, they start to settle themselves. Because you're not paying attention to them anymore. They're like, well, I'm not going to keep talking if no one's going to listen. And then finally to a point where it's silence. And when you're at that state, I feel that you're gone. Me personally, like I'm not saying I fly somewhere else, but I am so deep in my meditation that time flies. Yes. I've been so deep in meditation. I've come out of it an hour later and I go, what happened? And I pray every time I go to meditate, I pray for that because you come out so rested, so vibrant, so like life. You have a glow about you when you walk, and my kids see it too. Like they'll come out, they're like, "Oh, Daddy, you just meditated, weren't you?" I'm like, "Yeah." But it takes time to get to that place. It's like a muscle. You have to work it, and the mind starts. And so that's my meditative state. So now it's like, how deep can I go, and what can I see when I go down that deep? Because I've seen things, I've had experiences as well. A lot of times I'll have a question in life. I'll go, let me just go meditate on that. And the answer comes quietly, just comes. You ask the question in your meditation at the beginning, and by the end of it, you know what the answer is. It's pretty remarkable. So I'd love to hear your point of view.
So so I went to Japan, studied the martial arts, got to a very high level, received what you would call the Menkyo Kaiden, or like the 10th degree black belt kind of thing, the exposed to the entire system and asked to teach it. And what I realized is when I got to the advanced levels that there was a certain barrier that was very difficult to get beyond. My teacher used to have us, this is also true when I studied karate as a child, meditate at the beginning of class and at the end. And it was like just a few minutes, maybe a minute. For example, in my karate dojo, it was like meditate, and then we'd be meditating for like a minute, and then you'd say stop meditating, and then you'd start the class, that kind of thing. I'd ask the teacher, what is this meditation we're doing? Because it was never explained to me. I was like 12 years old when I started. I'm just sitting there, quiet, I guess, with my legs crossed at that time, doing meditation, not having any idea. So I asked one of my seniors after a couple of months, and I built up the courage to ask. And he says, I just used that time to visualize the technique. So that's all I ever did. And that's what I thought meditation was. It wasn't until I was 16 and I was dating a girl who had been practicing a kind of meditation, which I suspect now was mindfulness. But I saw her sitting cross-legged on the washing machine at my home. Like, what are you doing? She says, I'm meditating. What's meditation? She explains it to me. That night, I get into a terrible argument with my mother. I'm so frustrated. I go up the hill. We lived in the countryside, and I sit under this right in front of this eucalyptus tree, and I got to meditate, and I'm just furious, rage, and it just kept, kind of going back to center, and eventually all that just disappeared. I disappeared. I was one with the environment. It was completely amazing. And I remember opening my eyes because I felt something pulling me off to the left, like something was like there was a strain or something connected to the side of my body. It was lightly being tugged. And I looked over there, and maybe 10, 15 feet away, not very far at all, there's a coyote right in the middle of the trail who stopped and is looking at me. And so I'm looking at it. Now, these things, my head turned. This is not intention. All this is happening is my body's just doing it. And I'm observing my body doing this. If you've been to that place where that is the experience, and there's this feeling of like, almost like bowing to each other, right? Like he acknowledged me, I acknowledged him. We both were silent watching it. His ears weren't pricked up. It wasn't nervous. It was totally calm. Head a little bit low and sniffing. And, it was just like this, the kind of a communication that happened for, 10, 15 seconds, a fairly long period of time considering, and then it calmly walked off. My head turns back. I go back in the meditation. Like 15, 20 minutes later, I hear this sound, something going up the tree in front of me. Again, my eyes open and look, and there on the branch above my head is a bobcat. I mean, it had to, and this was just, it walked right in front of me and climbed up that tree. Now, I'm a teenage kid, like 16-year-old boy. Body odor on a summer night, right there, obviously, it just wasn't afraid of me. Right? It was not afraid of me. And so all this happened, and maybe an hour later, my body gets up on its own and starts walking down the hill. And I'm still not Richard, right? There's just clarity. That's all I can describe as clarity, and this feeling of seamlessness that I could never get back to. And I tried day after day, and I tried for months, and I tried for years. I couldn't get back there. And it was so frustrating, largely because of the expectation. That's not the goal. Like, to try to get back there was not helpful. Each time is fresh, each time is new. But then I also thought, well, if I when I started to get better at meditation, because I eventually, a few years later, I got more capable at it. I thought, well, I need to be able to make this a full-time thing, not like where it's a retreat from life, but I need to be able to function in my active daily life. I want to be able to incorporate this into my martial arts. I want this to be just everything. And so I started developing my own kind of way to be able to integrate it into everyday life. I ended up going to Japan and studying with a really amazing instructor there. And he would do like 2-second meditations. He would say, Mokuso Adratus, begin meditation. So we're just sitting for like 2 seconds. Wadi, and this. So it's like just start, stop. And then when we begin practice. And I had practiced for, I don't know, probably 9 years, 10 years before I actually, we started training privately when I got to high levels. We'd spend like half a day together training privately every day. And at some point I was just like, what is this thing we're doing at the beginning of class, like 2 seconds long? What's the purpose of it? What are we supposed to be doing during that time? And he says, I want you to figure that out. I think there's a secret teaching there. I want you to find it out. And then it eventually occurred to me, that's just simply what you would need as a samurai warrior. You need to be able to slip into a fully expansive state of clarity in an instant. Even 2 seconds is too long. And so that then became my goal. And eventually now I teach what I call the warrior's meditation. And it's this meditation it's not a retreat from life. You don't have to sit doing it. It's live time, all of your senses, and there's this expansiveness that just spreads into spreads from your being or to your being. It's both simultaneously that people practice throughout their day. And so it's a very different approach, but it also has that mindset that you can learn that any pressure doesn't necessarily prevent you from being in that state. And then the only question is, how can you be in that state under any pressure? You can do it in a heavy metal concert. You could do it running, swimming, working, anything.
Yeah, and that's what I love that, because you're absolutely right. Looking at a samurai, if he's about to go into battle, in a duel, he needs to be centered and in that state instantly. He can't go, give me an hour, I'll be right back. That's just generally not the way it works. I never really quite thought about it that way, but it's absolutely true. And if you have the ability to get into that state that normally takes people, even heavy meditators, it takes them 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes to go down that deep. If you can get there really quickly with practice, it's pretty remarkable. I think that there's definitely it's an everyday place of meditation. I think that you find, and this is my opinion, I think you would find more. The deeper the meditation you go, the longer the meditation goes, other things happen that a 2-second meditation doesn't give you the opportunity to do, but it is part of the arsenal that you have.
I don't mean it's a 2-second meditation. I'm saying it takes less than 2 seconds to get into that meditation. It's an all day long life experience. That's the aim. It's not a 2-second meditation.
Got it.
It is that is the process of getting into it, and that is too long. It is quite literally. At some point, it just is. There isn't a start and a stop.
So your goal,
living meditation.
Yeah, it's a living meditation, exactly. So your goal is to be that's in that state throughout your day without having to sit underneath a eucalyptus tree.
Yes, and it's also helpful to look at the brain waves. If we look at like alpha, for example, is the first brainwave state that one enters into when going into a state of meditation. So normally people are in a beta brainwave state in their active daily life until they get exhausted, in which case they slump into their chair and their brain shifts into what I'll call an unconscious alpha brainwave state. And that unconscious alpha brainwave state is a rest and digest process going on in the body. The autonomic nervous system has gone into a rest and digest phase. But they're not spatially aware. They're kind of zonked out. It's not a conscious alpha. But you can actually go into a conscious alpha, which is likely what happens when you're meditating, where you become actually highly aware, at least on an inner level. So you're not just slumped in front of a TV or just exhausted. You can also go deeper into a theta state where you're almost in this like twilight between consciousness and sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And you can get a lot of information from the subconscious from there. And you can also go into a conscious delta state, which is normally an unconscious state that you achieve at sleep. Right. And in this state, you can't move your body. You feel like a rock. Right. And there's like no mental movement whatsoever. It's complete vibrant silence. But it's like your blood pressure has gone down, your heart rate has lowered. So it's a dysfunctional state in terms of being able to move around. Mm-hmm. There's another brainwave state that we make use of in the Warriors meditation, which is gamma. Mm-hmm. This is a frequency that's actually above beta, and this is a frequency that when brainwaves are being investigated using EEG machines. Well, you got electroencephalography, I think is the term. They will wear the 4 brainwave states and also gamma, but this gamma thing is something that people can't just get into easily. It's a rather rare state. So they started to see if they could find people that could consistently get into it. And they tried regular meditators, and most couldn't get into it. The master Buddhist meditators could get into it consistently. A few sports athletes get into it when they're in the zone, but they can't intend it, and it happens. It sort of just happens naturally, like a Michael Jordan type goes into gamma during the game. But he can't just sit and talk with you and say, I'm in being gamma. That's not how it works. It's triggered. It's associated with a specific type of experience. And most athletes don't get that on a regular basis. The ones that are really amazing, they have the skill and that. And so what the Warriors meditation does is takes us into gamma during our active daily life. When we're in a seated state or lying state, we might want to go into the other options, which are delta, theta, or alpha, for example. But gamma is what really allows us to go about our active daily life in high awareness.
It's remarkable that throughout history, and specifically in the last 150 years or so, there's been so much more talk about meditation and getting to certain different states. Ram Dass famously used LSD, and he said the term is like, oh, LSD will get you in the room with Jesus and Buddha, but you only got 15 minutes. But you got 15 minutes and then you got to go. So, and there has been scientific research on what, certain mushrooms and certain psychedelics and things like that, they definitely take you to different states. And then heavy meditators go to those same states as well without some of the bad stuff that happens with those other things. There's no bad trips when it comes to meditation, generally speaking. But I've noticed that when you were saying the zone and athletes and trying to get to a certain level as far as gamma and theta and these different alphas, these mental states, brainwave states. Thank you. It seems like we are living. There's level 1, which is where we live on a daily basis, which is noisy, dirty, crazy, confusing. That dirty space that I was telling you about, cloudy.
That's beta.
Yeah, that's confusing. There's so much. It's stimulus. There's no real control. It's difficult.
Static.
Yeah, it's static. It's a lot of static going on. Where we're all, even athletes, they're trying to get to a different state that shuts all that off. I've been in the zone. And you could be in the zone when you write. You could be in the zone when you're an athlete. I was an editor for a long time, a video editor. So I would sit there and I would edit something I directed, and I could sit there 8 hours, and the time would just go because you were just so in the place. And I think we're always searching for that, and meditation is arguably the fastest way to, and the term fastest, but if you are meditating and constantly meditating and using your techniques as well, it gets you to that place where you can start seeing things a little bit clearer. And again, that word clear and clarify, because as a warrior, as a martial artist, you want to be calm. You want to be the calm lake. You don't want to be the raging river. because
Yes.
when you're angry, you make mistakes in martial arts. You're not thinking. Your emotions are running the show. Whereas when you're in this other state, the calm state, you can see everything coming towards you. You can adjust
Right.
effortlessly, and I think that's where our goal is on a daily basis to get to that calm state, regardless of what happens in our life. And some of these master meditating Buddhists and things that it doesn't even bother them. Something happens, they're like, okay, let's move on.
That's right.
They just kind of just parlay, like, parlay
That's
it,
right.
and they just move on,
That's right.
as opposed to someone who's just like, oh my God, I'm going to be 5 minutes late to the movies, and that ruins their entire day.
That's right.
It's just about perspective and getting to that state. And I think meditation is probably the easiest way to get there without any bad trips.
Yes. Well, it's interesting. I did meditation for years. I didn't actually have any psychedelic experience. I did in 2009. I had a first psychedelic experience, which was to go to the Amazon and take ayahuasca.
Oh, wow.
And it had the incredible benefits. It was very, very helpful. But it's not something you can take with you. This is the issue with, I think, psychedelics. Personally, I don't mind what people call bad trips. I think the mindset that it is a bad trip in itself is unhelpful,
Mm-hmm.
because you can learn from. In fact, you might find that you will learn a lot more from those things than you will from that pleasant stuff, because that stuff, whatever it is you're experiencing in that bad trip, is almost without exception attitudinal. You have an attitude against whatever is being presented to you. You're trying to run from it, and it will chase you for the rest of the trip. And if you're stuck in there for another 4 or 5 hours, and you may not even realize that you're on something, because that's how deeply you go. You forget that you took something,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't remember this is going to wear off in 5 hours, and you don't even know what the meaning of 5 hours is anymore. And it seems like you're going to be here forever, and you may not even know who you are, and you're running from this inner monster that you don't even realize is an inner monster. It's like forever hell. That's why they call it bad trips. It should be the horror trips. Whereas if you have enough conscious awareness and embodiment in the trip, you're lucid. You're lucid within the experience.
Mm.
And that allows you to actually have the realization, whatever this is a learning opportunity. And it's no longer a bad trip. But that same attitude applies to our daily life. You don't necessarily need psychedelics to embrace that attitude. Whatever's happening right now is an opportunity. Even if I don't see what the opportunity is, there is an opportunity. And I just don't want to dismiss or be disrespectful to psychedelics.
Agreed.
Because there can be a lot that's learned from them.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, most people that have had strong psilocybin, for example, journeys, like 80-90% of them say it's the top 5 experiences of their life. That's not accidental. Like the most important experiences of their life, like next to their child being born, or their winning the gold medal or whatever, that kind of thing, getting married. So I just find that meditators, I don't mean this against you,
Mm-hmm.
but I find that meditators can be quite arrogant in this area,
Mm-hmm.
where they dismiss other avenues. I'm not a proponent of psychedelics, nor am I a proponent of to exclusion or meditation to exclusion. Different people will have different avenues that they're going to want to take or may need to take. And it may be meditation for most people. I suspect that it is. But even those meditators, some of those individuals may benefit from a psychedelic experience every now and again. And some people are never going to do meditation, no matter what we say.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's not much from a psychedelic experience. I don't know.
There's a doctor in John Hopkins. I forgot his name, but he's the leading psilocybin. I forgot how to pronounce it. Psilocybin researcher in the world, and he's had I think 2,000 people go through the test. He said he has never had one bad trip. None of those people have ever had a bad trip, and 80 to 90% say it's the top 5 experience of their life.
Yes,
So
Roland Griffith.
Yes, that's him.
If I recall.
Yes. I know him because he was in that documentary. So I was watching and seeing what he was doing, and it's pretty remarkable. And it proves, because you started with LSD and mushrooms and all these other things, but there is different paths to that. It could be sitting underneath a eucalyptus tree, and finding enlightenment that way. It could be on a trip with psilocybin. It could be a million different ways. It's like every person has a different path in life. However you get there is up to you.
What I would say, there's one commonality amongst individuals who get there on what we'll say a kind of what you might. I don't like the word permanent, because again, there's a kind of arrogance to it, where it's essentially their daily life experience. Doesn't mean that they will never have moments where they're not in a perturbed state. I don't believe that mindset is helpful to think in that way, because you're not paying attention if you assume I'm perfect now. I
am the humblest of the humble. You've never saw anybody as humble as I am. I mean, seriously.
But what I can say is, so let's imagine that we do have someone who has a relatively healthy mindset regarding meditation, that it is just about making incremental improvements and embodying it a little bit more through our daily lives. Is that those who do make it, for those whom it becomes a normal conscious awareness, or this feeling of inner clarity we talked about, becomes the default mood of their life. They have a certain attitude, a desire somewhere deep inside to have it be the default mode of their life. And they're going to start to prune or weed their inner garden. Yeah. These thoughts are not helpful. These emotions are not serving any purpose. What is it that's generating these? What is my mind? What is the mindset, the patterning that I didn't necessarily choose or even create? It's just a lot of things are just momentum of ancestries coming down. We inherited it from our parents' attitude unconsciously and developed our sense of self around it. What are these patterns? What do they look like? What do they feel like in the body? And then and finding that clarity and allow them to release, so that it's kind of this inner weeding that happens. And that static-y quality we were talking about starts to diminish. And eventually there's clarity.
I always find that spiritual masters throughout history, I always like saying, I'm like, well, they were spiritual, but they had no kids. Obviously, I mean, they had no kids. I mean, that's because you're like, I could find enlightenment like Buddha, but I've got kids, and they're young kids. But it's so wonderful.
Yeah, we never heard about Jesus as Christ's children.
Right. Bob and Sarah, you never hear about Bob and Sarah. But there's one guru, an Indian guru, his name is Lahiri Mahashai, who actually was a father and had kids. And he was, I think he was an accountant. And then towards later, like once the kids had grown up a bit, that's when he started really going deep down the spiritual path. But I'm like, hey, if you've got 5-year-olds, God bless you. If you I want to see a spiritual master with 5-year-old twins.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I remember when I was in Japan, my profession was teaching junior high school and middle school.
Uh-huh. Oh.
And so I taught middle school was there for 15 years. So I guess I taught middle school for about 13 out of the 15 years. And, they're basically insane at that stage. They're going through puberty. If you recall what it was like when you were going through, half of them don't know why they're doing what they're doing. They have no clue why they feel what they're feeling. It's volatile.
It's horrible. It's horrible. Oh, God.
And you're hurting scorpions no matter what you do. We're hurting. Some days we're such the nicest kid you'll ever see, and the next day you're like, who is this little monster?
I just got stung.
It was a very helpful experience for me, because I would always I would make it a goal before I entered my classroom to be in at least a conscious alpha state, or if possibly a gamma brainwave state, so meditative state, one that's slightly below or more lower blood pressure state, rest and digest, or one that's a higher blood pressure, or not higher blood pressure. What would it be? It's not a higher blood pressure state. It's probably an even blood pressure state, but it's vibrant, expansive, feels expansive, like this, like love is everywhere kind of thing.
You got to.
But you're not. It's not fuzzy. It's crystal clear, not fuzzed out. And so that was the goal. And then I would just notice what was it that would happen that would pull me out of it in the classroom, and that would then be my challenge, right?
Yeah, it was, but at least you got to go home.
I got to go home. Yes, I got to go home. I didn't have to take it with me.
No, and it's really interesting. I mean, when you're trying to walk a spiritual path, and look, children are wonderful. I love them, and I love my kids. I'm not saying anything about them, but I always tell people I'm 25. Look what they've done to me. I mean, it's just, it does age you. I have girls, so it's like dog years in aging. It's pretty insane. But I always found that very fascinating. I'm like, none of these spiritual teachers have kids. None of that I could recognize. So I was always looking for someone. So Lahiri Mahashaya is my go-to guy, the yogi master that I go to. I'm like, okay, Lahiri, help me out here, man. Because I feel like I'm going to kill these two.
You're all right.
Now, one thing that a lot of people, I think it's one of the most, meditation has been studied for decades, and is one of the most heavily studied things in history. Really, there's just tens of thousands of studies about this. Can you talk a little bit about the health benefits of meditation? Because I, just from my point of view, I actually had my blood test done about 3 or 4 months ago by a nutritionist. And I was like, okay, and they went in and did everything. And they just started looking at my numbers, and she was like, you meditate, don't you? And I go, yeah. He goes, yeah, because this is down and this is down, and this is like of someone who's 25 years old, and this is like, oh wow, really? She's like, yeah. Meditation definitely has an effect on your body, no question. So I'd love to hear your point of view.
Yes, in fact, a similar thing when I go and have health checks. It's this body is 48 now. Whatever it is that I actually feel as me is timeless, but the body is 48. And my heart rate is 120 over 65 or 70, like my blood pressure. Sorry. It's like the doctors are
like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing?
Well, they're drawing my blood. They're taking blood pressure here, and then drawing my blood at the same time. My blood pressure doesn't change at all. I'm watching them put the needle in. They're like, nobody can do this. How do you not? Your blood pressure hasn't changed at all in the process of putting the needle in and taking it out. How are you able to remain so clear? That's meditation. I've been doing meditation. I teach it, right? And so if you go into a state of avoidance, you're not going to look, right? And that's a fight-flight response, right? That's a heightened beta brainwave state. It's going to cause your heart to go crazy. Right? You're going to go, it's going to elevate. And so what meditation is doing is essentially keeping the body from going into this fight-flight response habitually under, any given circumstance. Stress, what we call stress, is keeping our body in a constant fight-flight response. That is ruinous to the circulatory system, to the hormones, it just
inflammation.
Inflammation. Yeah, everything. It is ruinous. Your sleep's going to suffer. You name it. The only thing that I have that's actually gotten high is my cholesterol, and that's basically I spent the last 3 years writing a lot. There's so much information. Especially in this, as stress is getting higher and higher, the more compelled I am to get this meditation out to the world so that it could be of use to people. We still need to go about our days. How do we do it in a way that's going to be healthy? So I just need to get off my butt more often, get away from the keyboard more often, and spend more time exercising. which is something I used to do constantly in Japan. But since COVID-19 kicked, the dojo's closed. The dojo's
Don't get me
closed.
started. Don't get me started, man. Those COVID pounds are serious, Bren.
2 years now. I've not gained a pound, but my cholesterol's gone up. So, yeah. I'm still only 10% body fat. Right.
God, I hate you and love you at the same time, sir. Because I'm 47, and COVID has did a number on me as far as pounds are concerned. So I was in the best shape of my life prior. I was like at, I don't know, probably 15% body fat, and then the gym closed.
Yeah.
And you tried. You're like, well, I'll just keep doing something at home. And it just like slowly just starts weaning and weaning and weaning to the point where just like, it's tough. Hey, no one's perfect. And everyone's got something.
Everyone's got something. If I took maybe every 2 hours, took 15 minutes and used that time to do, finger push-ups and some planks and some sit-ups and some jogging in place, but I get absorbed in whatever's coming through. It's a strong conveyance, and I'm riding, for 8 hours or some long period of time, and then as you talked about, that time is gone. Where'd that go?
And I didn't work out during that time. My cholesterol now has gone up.
Yeah, I knew actually. That's something that I can learn from. Set an alarm to, every couple of hours it's got to go off. I got to do my workout. Right? Got to grab my son and start swinging.
I think a lot of people look at like, I hate to use the term gurus or people who are at a different state or a different level in their own lives as, like they got it all figured out. We're all human. We all have issues with being a human. No matter who you are, ego plays a part of things, and there's always whatever it is to be human. It is suffered by all of us and experienced by all of us and enjoyed by all of us. And I've had the pleasure of talking to. I'm sorry, I didn't mean Jordan. I've had the pleasure of talking to some of the biggest people in the film industry, and I just, you put them up as an idol sometimes, and then you talk to them and you're like, oh, they're human beings. You're human beings, no matter how big they are, no matter how many Oscars they win, no matter what movies they've made or written or anything like that.
That's
we
right.
all have to deal with the exact same thing. And I had and I'll let you go. I'll let you answer. There was a guest I had that happened to meditate with the Maharishi in India with the Beatles. He was one of the 5 people that happened to be at the ashram that week. And when he was walking after he learned how to meditate, he was in this state, and he's walking and he's like, oh, there's John Lennon and Paul McCartney sitting at the picnic table. And he just starts walking towards them. And as he starts walking towards them, he feels nothing. Like his state is fine, but his heart starts going faster because arguably they were the biggest stars in the world. They were the most famous people in the entire planet in 1964. John Lennon, Paul McCartney. And as he walks in, a voice talked to him and said, hey, they're just human beings. They fart and are scared of the dark.
That's right.
And it's something that is like, that makes such a perfect, profound statement about humanity. Yeah. We all fart and we all are scared of the dark.
That's right.
So that's you right. To say.
And if we can keep that in mind, that's very helpful. So again, the idea of perfection it creates an expectation and a wall to the type of awareness we're talking about.
Right.
It's actually more helpful just to say you're not fundamentally different than a rock or a tree or the wind or anything else. A pond, even a still pond, can become polluted.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Very much.
We want the flow. We want a flow in our lives, but we also have to recognize that flow is we'll say a yin force. We've got an order and a chaos. We've got 24 hours in a day. We need to put food on the table. which means a certain amount of our energy needs to be productive, or else we're not going to have any money.
Mm-hmm.
And so then we have to time manage, right? These are not problems or mistakes. They're just challenges,
Mm-hmm.
right? And those challenges are going to be there whether you're awakened or not. And unless by some means you followed the rainbow and hit a pot of gold, so you didn't have to have money. But in my case, I'd still be writing the books.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not doing it for money. I mean, I charge the books have a price, but that's not the primary motivation.
Right.
This information just needs to be given out, conveyed. And so I still have those time constraints. In fact, I would say, if anything, since this is now I've written this. I'm on the 6th book now.
Mm-hmm.
If anything, as my audience has increased, the reader's audience, as my student base has increased, I teach an online meditation every day, and so we get lots of people. I get emails, asking questions throughout the day. I mentor some people on the side. I teach courses, and if anything, time has gotten tighter.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's actually more difficult to manage that time. Right? Not easier, and it is more difficult precisely because the meditation works. And I'm sharing with people, and then they have questions about it. There's only one of me to answer those questions, and I have to answer those questions by moving these little knobs in the end of my hands.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes physical time. As any way of getting around that, but I don't see that as a mistake or a problem. It's more of a challenge. How do I find a balance between the yin and the yang, the order and the chaos?
I want to ask you, I'd love to hear your opinion on this. We as human beings throughout history have wanted our spiritual teachers, whether that be Jesus, Buddha, an Indian yogi, whoever, to come literally from the womb enlightened. And they don't, Jesus is a perfect example. He was born and then 30 years later he shows up and he's ready. Well, there's a big gap there, buddy. Like, what happened during that time? And same with Buddha, same with many of the spiritual teachers. What is it about? Why can't humans just realize that that someone like Jesus, I'll just use him as an example, he was born a human and learned his lessons and figured his path out. And when he found that Christ consciousness, that's when he showed up, or at least that's when he starts being written about, or whatever you want.
No, that's when he would become noticeable in any case, right?
Exactly, when he gets to that place. But it's a journey for everyone. You look at Yogananda, you look at any of the Indian gurus. None of them just showed up and go, I'm a 2-year-old. I know how to fix your life. Follow me to spiritual paradise. It doesn't work that way. But so many religions in the world, and so many, I wouldn't say philosophies, but more the religions of the world are based around perfect beings. And they might have attained perfection. And again, I hate the word to use perfect, but they might have hit a level of consciousness that is far beyond what we can do. And they're trying to teach it to us. But they didn't come out that way. Can you talk a little bit about your perspective on that?
Yes, it's human beings, unfortunately, view ourselves as separate from God.
Right.
It doesn't matter if you're religious or not.
Right.
We view ourselves as separate from the universe. And I remember the first time this really hit home for me. I was in the Amazon. The Achuar tribe that we were staying with, they had a tribal member who guided us through the forest. We took us a long walk, basically half a day. At one point, he stopped in front of this massive tree that has a girth like you would imagine the largest redwood would have. It's not quite as tall, but it was massive. I don't even remember what the tree was, but it's the biggest. It's like the tree of life if you ever saw one. Right? It was just amazing. And so he's talking about this tree and how it's being cut down in the forest for wood. And this thing takes like 5,000 years to mature, something ridiculous.
Right.
Maybe not quite that long, but over 1,000 years in any case. But that its existence actually allows for many kinds of fungi to exist that nourish the other plants. And so you remove this tree from the forest, it's not the same forest anymore.
Right.
It fundamentally it starts to die. It talked about Shell and Chevron going in and cutting down the forest and just dumping the oil on the forest floor, the what do you call it, the chaff or whatever you call it, chemicals gets in the river, so people get cancer or you live in the jungle there. I talk about all this stuff, and then after he finished speaking, one of the people that I was, one of the tourists that I was there with, asked, what are you going to do when the forest is gone? And I remember the look on his face. He was perplexed, obviously perplexed, like he didn't understand the question, which to us seems like an obvious question. And then he looked down and thought about it for a minute and then says, well, I am the forest. When the forest is gone, I'm gone. This is the earth. You are the earth, right? It was like to him, this idea, and it wasn't just an idea, this was a felt reality for him. We could kind of mentally play with that concept, but most of us don't really feel that way. We think of the earth as a resource. We don't think of it as a living being that we are, and that these bodies are an expression of the earth, which is an expression of the solar system, which is an expression of the galaxy, which is an expression of the entire universe. Every single cell in your body is a reflection of the totality of being. And there's no getting around that. Now, you may not acknowledge that, and you may not feel that. If you'd like to feel it, that's what meditation ultimately is possibly for. But going back to why people have this perception and why we would expect our masters to be born perfect is because we don't believe that we are one with all that is, and we don't respect ourselves. Mm-hmm. We're looking down on ourselves and we're looking up to God. What needs to happen is we need to look down right below our feet and go, oh, that's God too. And so is this. And so is that. And every breath I take and every move I make. We're getting into a nice police song here. Right?
I'll be watching you.
I'll be watching you. Right?
Yeah.
And you'll be watching me. And that's the relationship with the environment. And there isn't an inner dimension and an outer dimension. And there isn't a guru who's above you. If you want perfection, see that and allow that to mirror in your life. And you don't need to then follow this idea of some external measurement of perfection. Perfection is not relevant anymore because you're not measuring this versus that.
Yeah.
The parallel processing part of the brain, the human brain, which is generally on the right, which is on the right side for almost everybody, that is the thing that allows this sort of continuum of awareness. The left hemisphere of the brain, it's a serial processing brain. It focuses on one thing at a time and it loses context. That's the thing that's driving everybody crazy. It has its purpose. It's not evil. But when there's an imbalance of forces, we suffer. A properly balanced human being is resting right between the hemispheres.
And I think also ego plays a big part of, separation of self. Like it's me.
It's the story of yourself.
Yeah, it's
the story of yourself.
Right. And that's which comes we brings us back to the very beginning of our conversation with meditation, in the sense that when you are in meditation, in a deep meditation, there is no Alex, there is no Richard. You are just one. With it's very Borg-like. Star Trek fans might understand. Like we've assimilated. I know you've probably never heard that reference,
but not malice of the aim. Yes, it's a benevolence. That's the difference between the Borg. But yes,
yes. But it's this kind of
reach the common ground of being, right?
Yeah, and there is no separation anymore. And that's, yes. I think, the cause of most of the problems in our entire world and in our lives is the need to separate ourselves, like you part of that group and you're part of that group and I'm this and I'm a man and you're a woman and that's what these roles are and race and all these other things. We're always looking for things to separate us where we should be looking for things to, you never see, the sequoia and the redwoods arguing. Going, oh, well,
Well, they do under the surface. Their roots battle. Actually, there are wars under the surface. And so So I want to stress here, this is something that, pardon me for maybe saying something that's counter to what you were suggesting.
Sure, go for it.
The force isn't wrong. Categories are not wrong. They are necessary. Like, you have to be able to prioritize one thing in order to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, so for example, if I'm going to reach for a cup of water, I first have to believe that the water will nourish me, which is a category, which is an exclusiveness.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And then I have to actually understand that this hand or this hand has to reach, not the foot. There is a specific identity. The hand, which has a certain function, needs to be what reaches over, grabs it, puts it to the lips, which have another function. So all these categories have a purpose. In the same way, every category in our life has its function, so long as it's actually meant as a function. So it's not just shadow content, right? So it's functional, not just shadow content, not just your belief that you want to force everybody else to have. It's not that the categories are wrong by default. It's just we become too hard, which means that the left hemisphere of the brain has become overly dominant.
Rigid, right?
Rigid. It's the rigidity that's the issue.
Right.
So if you look at our body, we have this flesh on the outside, which is soft compared to the bone. So this would be a yin energy compared to the bone, which would be a yang energy. It's relative. One softer than the other. Inside the bone, again, there's marrow. It's a yin energy, right? Inside the marrow, we got cells that have structures that are yang energy, and then we have liquids that have yin. It just, throughout all of existence, there's this layers of yin and yang. And when a human being is aware of those layers and maintains that balance between the hemispheres, between the sides of the body, between technique and awareness, that's whole, that's balance, that's functional. But we can go into an ideology and say the left hemisphere is evil. The categories are wrong, in which case your house cannot stand.
Right. When I was talking about categories, it's more in regards to self and ego as opposed to different categories of life. I agree with you 110%. But the separation of us as humans, as souls, is what I was talking about. Whereas that, there's much more in common we have much more in common than we have out of common.
99.9% of our experience is common to other people.
We all have mothers and fathers. We all love. We all want to be loved. We all want security. We all want spiritual awakening in one way, shape, or form, hopefully, depending on what level you're at when you walk into this.
Almost every statement you just said there is not correct.
So tell me. So we don't all have mothers and fathers?
Not everybody has mothers and fathers that they've ever met.
No, never met, but there has to be a mother and a father too.
Yeah, genetically, yes.
Genetically, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
But that's not what people mean when they say mother and father, is it?
Well, no. I was meaning it literally, like that's physiology. Yes, you're absolutely right.
But not all of us experience love either.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Not all of us actually want love, because to love requires that you trust. It requires that you see somebody and you allow yourself to be seen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So there's a lot of people out there that are suffering.
Yeah, you're right.
I mean, to a degree that we can't hardly imagine. Unfortunately, I mentor these people, and I see things that it's like I could not have imagined prior to hearing and seeing these people's lives. Those people need meditation.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they need meditation. Some of them want meditation, but they don't know that they want love.
That's true.
Because love takes trust, and they've been hurt badly, right? These are I don't want to say it's an unfortunate state to be in, because I don't view any state as lost.
It's learning like anything else.
It's an opportunity. If they take it, and I certainly, it's not on my part to make them take that. I can invite and support, and that's all that I can do, all that any of us can do. But I guess the key point that I would like to suggest is going back to that eternal question of not knowing, being less certain of our conclusions. I have a comment saying that Lucifer expresses through our convictions and conclusions about the truths of life. metaphorical Lucifer. It's always this, it's never that. This is certain. I know this to be true. Like somebody stepped out of the right hemisphere and has completely laid their eggs in the left hemisphere, at least with regard to that particular topic. And no matter what we believe to be true right now, if I asked you 1,000 years from now, will we still say that that's true?
Of course, yeah. Galileo, ask Galileo.
Yeah, exactly. Einstein, people thought we're never going to go past Einstein. Well, we're already going past Einstein. People are, we're starting to see new things that he didn't anticipate, right? And it's not been that long.
It really hasn't. It really hasn't. And these last 200 years have been astronomical in regards to the advancements that we've made as a species. And it's really interesting why it's all happening now. And for the last 3,000 years, I mean, everything was still here. All the materials were here. Everything, oil was here. But it just happened that the last couple hundred years really sped up. I mean, when I was born, when you and I were born, my first television, which was my grandfather's, had no remote. I was the remote. Yes. There was 3 channels.
I remember this.
There was three channels. Right. In our lifetime, how many things have changed? The internet, all this kind of stuff. In my grandparents' lifetime, they were born in a time when there was no airplanes.
Right.
No cars. Like, can you imagine? Right. And then we're on the moon. Like,
if you think about what you said there, it's amazing what we've lived through. There was, if we look at the ages of our human existence, so we had the Stone Age,
right,
which was like 100,000 years, right? From modern humans, like say that modern humans existed 200,000 years ago. If I recall, they suggested that that's when anatomically modern humans came into being. In the Stone Age, for like all of that time, except for the last 5,000-6,000 years. And about 5,000-6,000 years ago, we entered the Bronze Age. And then later on, a few thousand years later, we entered the Iron Age. And that continues on until we get to the manufacturing age.
Industrial.
Right, which is Industrial Revolution, right? And that continued until we hit the, what would we say, the automobile or oil age, right? The oil age. And that continued until we hit the electric age. And that continued until we hit the computer age. And that continued until we hit the internet age. And then the cell phone age. And then the Zoom or, Google age. And then it's like on and on. We're about to go. We're just a few years away from chips.
The Matrix.
Into where we are living cyborgs.
And
so we actually, in our lifetimes, have encountered the vast majority of the ages that have existed since modern human existed. There were like 4 before us. The Industrial Revolution being like really the only thing that was before us, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's. Oh no, we're not too far away. We are not too far away from the Matrix, where I want to learn kung fu, and they just plug you in, and then you have kung fu. Like we're not too far away from that. Honestly, we're just not. And as scientific, as sci-fi as that sounds, try explaining Zoom or Skype to someone in the 80s.
Absolutely impossible. If you told me, if you remember when Star Trek, the first Star Trek came out, like, it was before we were born, but it was on TV at the time when we were youngsters. We have those. And we have the Dick Tracy watches now. We have Dick Tracy watches. I mean, it's insane what we've been able to accomplish but I think with the beauty of that is all of that was accomplished primarily with the left hemisphere of the brain.
Right. And I think now we're starting to get to the place, and with all of this, with everything that's happened and all our technological advances in life, people seem to be more in pain, more struggling, more disconnected, even though we're more connected than we've ever been in the history of our species.
Right.
I think now I'm hoping we're going to get into the new revolution, which is the spiritual revolution, where we're all searching. Everyone's searching for something else because, when you don't have to worry about the basics and life is, there's so much technology around you and advancements that you're like, okay, I have all of this. Now what? Like, now what? I think, and that spiritual transformation has been happening probably, obviously for the last couple thousand years, but I think it's now really, especially in the West, with meditation, spirituality. I mean, can you imagine like in the 80s or in the 70s talking about meditation? I was like, you were out there. You were like in a completely,
yes, right.
You were a completely,
you're a hippie.
You're a hippie. Meditation. What are you, vegan? What do you eat, grass? Like it's, like it's this whole, but now those kind of things, meditation, mindfulness, yoga, that's part of our daily life. That's completely part of the zeitgeist now. And I think we're all starting to get to that place. I mean, there's meditation apps.
That's right.
There's so many things that now, where we were young, were absolutely not only heresy, depending on what household you grew up in, but it just seemed completely out there. Like my mother meditated when she was in the 70s, and my Latino mother-in-law would look at her and go, she's crazy.
Yes.
She's crazy. She was feeding me carrot juice as opposed to cow's milk when I was a kid. And they go, oh my God, that kid's going to die. Because it was outside of their reference point. And I think, so I'm hoping that I think you're doing a great job with your work. And I'm trying to do it in my small way with the work that I do to try to get people to that next revolution. And I think that spiritual revolution I'm hoping is where we're going to go, because I don't think we can continue the way we're going. I think this train is going to crash. It's going to fall off the tracks soon. It's already squeaking pretty badly.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I had this vision in my mind of, do you remember the old Warner Brother cartoons and with Bugs Bunny and the Roadrunner and all that kind of stuff? And there was a Roadrunner and a coyote. I don't know if younger people might not know this.
That's amazing.
There was often there's this battle. The coyote's trying to get the Roadrunner, and sometimes the Roadrunner would run off the cliff, and the coyote would follow the Roadrunner. And the coyote would stay suspended in the air so long as he didn't look down.
Right.
It was the moment that he looked down.
Right? The belief.
Yes. To me, that's kind of where society is now. We've really gone off the cliff, right? We just haven't looked down yet. We just haven't looked down yet.
It's a great analogy. I love that analogy.
Right.
And I always rooted for the coyote because I could stand that cocky Roadrunner constantly. I mean, I felt so bad for this poor guy. He buys all these Acme products that don't work.
Well, so here's the question. Why didn't the Roadrunner fall?
That's the question, huh?
He never looked down.
He was the enlightened spirit.
He never looked down.
He was the enlightened one. The Roadrunner was the enlightened one because his belief, because he did things that nobody else could do. Like he would go through a painted side of a mountain that looked like a tunnel. He would go right through it. And then he would crash into it.
Yeah.
So I think our hypothesis here today for everyone listening is that the Roadrunner was an enlightened yogi and could do things. He could go through materialistic. He could walk right through material things. He could teleport himself. Didn't matter any of it. He had complete powers of his yogic powers, and yet the coyote was just this fool who thought he had things, but he just couldn't figure. He was very left brain. Let's just put it that way.
He was knowledge based, and the Roadrunner was faith based. Maybe
it was completely at a completely different level. But I'm so glad we've broken that down here today. I think that's, if anything, of a value in our conversation is we've established that the Roadrunner is a very powerful yogi in the Warner Brother cartoons.
That's right. That's right.
I have two questions I want to ask you. What do you believe your mission in this life is?
I'm not sure I know, like, logically what my mission is. I can only refer to what I see happening. Mm-hmm. And that's just spreading something that hopefully will be, some people might find helpful in their lives. Like, that's really it.
And
a return, in a sense, maybe.
Okay. Yeah. And why do you think we are all here?
I don't know. But But that being said, I do have a perspective on it that we might find helpful.
Okay.
And that is that the universe is not actually at its fundament time. It's just potential. And when all potential is seen, for example, I don't know if through whatever means that you've had this experience where essentially whatever it is that you are is gone, and you experiencing the consciousness that people would call God, like the complete vibrant oneness with all.
Oneness. Yeah.
Yes. That space is the space of potential. It is the space that, if you were to give it a mindset, the mindset is there is no other. Non-otherness. It's not caught up in any specific potential. But because it is all potential, the potential for limitation, the potential for specific identity is also a potential within its possibility.
Mm-hmm.
And so it can go into dreamlike states that are what I see as the hologram of the universe. And within those holograms of the universe are infinite stories of specific experience that's always made up of positive and negatives. That all potential consciousness we're talking about is equal to zero. The dreams are always yin and yang, positive and negative, that balance out to zero. The entire equation is zero. We're here not because we're supposed to do something. It's just the dream of God.
Mm-hmm.
And the interesting thing about it is once we're aware of that on an embodied level, everything feels meaningful. And when we're not aware of that on an embodied level, we are constantly searching for meaning. But the way that we will search for meaning will be in specific things, like what will be my legacy, or how I can do, how I can be the best at this or that, or raise a good family, or right. None of those things are wrong. There's not a judgment against those things. I'm just saying that in a lot of ways, those are compensations for the lack of the felt experience of a fundamental being and meaningfulness that is actually the very foundation of each individual's being.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't experience that because we don't believe and trust and have faith in our truest nature. We have xenophobia of ourselves. And meditation, if it's effective, undoes that xenophobia, so that you can be truly a capital YOU.
And on that note, we will leave our conversation. Richard, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been wonderful, and I know we could talk for at least another 3 hours just on the Roadrunner alone. But where can people find out more about you and the work that you do?
RichardLHaight.com. The spelling is hate. Transition is height. I teach a daily meditation they might enjoy, and you can find that on the website. There's also the book, The Warrior's Meditation, which is probably the most. I have 5 books out currently. That's the one that I think most people would benefit from, because it will teach them the method through which they can find that capital YOU aspect of themselves in their active daily life, assuming they practice.
There's that. Richard, thank you again for being on the show. Thank you again for being on the show, my friend. I truly appreciate what you do and for being here. So thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you for having me. It was a joy.
Thanks for watching. Click on one of the videos below to continue your journey, and don't forget to subscribe.